a change to single-stage route of origin will result in the industrialization benefits brought about by existing textile and clothing industry being lost, together with the skills and development potential and job-creating opportunities of these industries. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, when your next was really listening to what you were saying, I think the message is very clear, at least from your experience and from your view, that opting for the simpler single transformation may not be the way to build what the AfCFTA is trying to do, which is it's more than trade agenda, it's industrialization agenda. In that case, double transformation may not be the type of option that some countries want in terms of short-term gain, but in the long term, that is the way forward. This is a message that I got, this message we're getting from this intervention. Thank you very much. Now, another colleague who may have to leave early is from IIP, Mr. Vikas Budhiraja. If he can listen to me, let me. Is he connected? Yeah, okay.
Yes, I can listen to you, yes.
Very good, very good. As a developer and operator of world-class industrial ecosystem in Africa, the IIP designs, finances, and builds, operates integrated and tailor-made industrial zones. These are very important for attracting investment. So I think my question is very simple, that how many of these zones have you built so far? But more importantly, is it a PPP format in terms of building this very important industrial infrastructure? And also, if you link it to how you think such zones will contribute to what we're talking about, building regional value chains and the intra-Africa trade agenda, especially in the context of investment in textile and apparel products. Did you get me?
Thank you very much. This is Vikas Budhiraja from Arise IIP, which is, as you rightly mentioned and introduced, we are an ecosystem developer across Africa, and predominantly operating in West Africa at the moment, as most of our investments are coming into West Africa at the moment to start with, though we have a plan to be fully Pan-African platform. So to start with, I'll give you a little brief about the company, how it is operating in different parts of Africa. So specifically in West Africa, we have right now industrial zone operating in Benin and Togo, where we are developing complete ecosystem, right from raw material, storage within the warehouses in the zone, along with the establishment of spinning value chain, knitting and weaving value chain, as well as garmenting and dyeing and printing setups being coming by Arise themselves. We understand the challenges which this industry faces in Africa, specifically on skilling part, specifically on investment mobilization part, as well as various other sectors where we are, right now concentrating. So we are developing this ecosystem basis all the factors of production, manpower, electricity, logistics, as well as the investment front. So we are bringing in investments from India, China, Bangladesh, Turkey, all the industrial, textile centers of the world. And we are encouraging them with all the value adds which the zone can provide to them to success in their respective zones and in their respective activity. So to start with, we have started developing our own pilot projects in the zones so that it gives confidence to the upcoming or budding entrepreneurs to set up those plants in the sector. So we have come up with 3 vertical integrated units with co-investment and joint venture, partnership. And then we have put up our own garment training centers within the zones to provide skilled manpower to all the investors who are coming to these zones. So in nutshell, I would say we are developing these vertical integrated and ecosystem based zone in Africa, not only to bring investors, but also to showcase to the world that because we have raw material in Africa, we have the youngest population in Africa. So we have every chance to succeed in this value chain integration, which can actually supply their finished product to all the Western countries of the world. So with that particular mindset, Arise IIP had initiated close to $1 billion of investment in Togo and Benin. And going forward, we are coming up with such industrial zones in Ivory Coast, in Ghana, in Rwanda, in DRC, as well as various other countries. So here I would stop, and I would looking forward to your comments, if any, and I can explain it further.
Thank you very much. And this is very helpful because I think for the new vision of developing sustainable, competitive the textile and apparel sector in Africa, establishing such integrated industrial zones are going to be critical, because this is, I think, the way to attract investment from outside Africa. And as to how, in terms of quality, how it works, we'll talk again, because Isaac, you operate in a zone.
Yes.
But for the moment, thank you very much. Now I'll move to another colleague online, Mr. Hama Wakajara in Nigeria. I hope he's listening. My question to him related in a way to what we just discussed, which is the integrated textile and garment park. Nigeria has established Funtua, integrated textile garment park. This is actually one of the 6 priority projects in the Nigeria Industrial Revolution Plan. And the reason why I wanted to ask him is that the timing makes it, the timing of this very huge complex to attract investment into textile and apparel area in an integrated way, makes it really critical for building what we're talking about, strengthening the fiber to garment regional value chains. So what I wanted to ask him was, when this park was being set up, was the vision and objective triggered by the regional value chains? Was AfCFTA trying to do? If so, what do you think will be the contribution of Nigeria through this investment in this park for development of regional value chains, and also your views on rules of origin, if you could share with us?
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. Actually, I apologize. I could have been there with you on the panel, but due to some challenges in flight and visa. Well, thank you very much for the question again. I think this textile park they're talking about, that's the issue with the government. They do their things without involvement of the private sector, and sometimes the shoddy implementation of policies. I think this textile park they're talking about, they're still talking about even the location. The location of the park itself is still being discussed, because there's a conflict between the state government and the federal government as to where to site the park itself. I'm not talking of anything yet, no machinery, nothing there yet for the benefit of the industry. And Nigeria being the economic giant of Africa, it's unfortunate that there's no concern for industry. Because we found out that up to today, we're having depreciating power supply, which we cannot have 24 hours. Highest we can have is 8 hours, and we have to make do with other inputs, alternative inputs like diesel, black oil, which are on the high side, making most of our companies to close. In fact, in the 1980s to 90s, about 100 textile mills closed down. Now Nigeria has only about 3 textile mills surviving, with other accessories that are into textile, about 20. So we make about 4 textile mills, textile association. So these are the companies that are still surviving. And the challenge is that this thing is still wishy-washy. Every time there's policy, very good policy, implementation becomes a problem. That's why we actually welcome the coming of AfCFTA, because our markets, we don't even have access to markets. Our markets are filled up with substandard goods that are selling cheaper. They've taken our design, go to somewhere and bring it to our market and selling it less than the production price of our manufacturing companies. So it's a big challenge to us, and we are happy that RO will come, rule of origin will come to find out where the manufacturing is coming from before they come into our market. So our hope is based on the establishment of this AfCFTA, so that our companies can survive. Otherwise, everything is done anyhow in this country, and it's unfortunate that all our markets, everything is filled up with substandard goods, and they're taking our designs and selling less than the cost price. So this becomes a big challenge. We have less than 10,000 megawatts of electricity to 200 million people. South Africa, Cairo, even Ethiopia has a very good textile park. So I don't know what's happening with our country, that we cannot meet up with common industrial competitiveness in the region. So there's a lot that needs to be done that this committee can work on to ensure that Africa has good production, and with low production costs, with benchmark with other countries, that we can sell anywhere within Africa. So with the help of Afrexim Bank and what have you, they can put a lot of investment back into our industries, so that they'll be controlled by this big body. Otherwise, if it is done by our own regulatory authorities, then nobody is serious on handling industrial matters.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I hope this plan.
Just hope something good will be done.
Did you finish? Yeah. Thank you very much. I hope this plan will proceed, because we know that Nigeria, having developed capability in textile related production in the 60s and 70s under import substitution, and it was all lost afterwards, form of deindustrialization. So I hope this new vision, new approach of establishing integrated industrial zones will attract investors, and investment will resume again in the textile part of the chain. Thank you very much. Now, experience from Morocco, again online. I hope she can listen, Fatima. Morocco has introduced a new vision for the textile and apparel industry. It's called DAYEM. Apparently it means sustainable in Arabic. So my question again is whether this new vision was in any way influenced by global trends only, or also the new African agenda, which is part of the AfCFTA, to build regional value chains. If you could share your views on that, and whether the private sector was consulted in this process. Plus, linked to that, I would also like to ask you about the FTA, Morocco's FTA with EU. To what extent that really contributes to the development of your export capability, and also the implications on rules of origin, because I understand the FTA negotiated with EU as a sort of lenient rules of origin, whether that has been sort of a stimulus to develop backward the integrated sector, or a discouragement. Is that?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, I'll start with the first question about DAYEM Morocco, the new vision. This new vision was actually designed by the private sector in collaboration with the Moroccan authorities, because it's actually a consequence of the COVID crisis that we've all been through. And after we saw the impact of this crisis on the Moroccan textile industry, we've decided that we needed a new work plan, a new vision for the Moroccan textile industry to reduce its vulnerability to external shocks like the COVID crisis. So it is, of course, it's been designed taking into account the overall international trends that were all pointed out towards more sustainability. But we didn't restrict the DAYEM vision into environmental sustainability only. It also includes another major concern for us, which is social sustainability. Like you said earlier, DAYEM means sustainable in Arabic, and the purpose for us was to establish that the Moroccan textile industry is both sustainable in an environmental way, but also in a social way, and also in an economic way, because if you don't have businesses, you don't have jobs anyway. So to answer the first question, yes, it is a privately led initiative or vision that is fully supported by the Moroccan authorities and the Moroccan government. And we've been, since the announcement of the vision, working with the Moroccan government to implement this vision, including investments in the integration of the value chain at the country's level, but also at the continental level, in order to increase the value that is created on the continent, the added value that is created on the continent in the textile industry. With regards to your question on the FTA with the European Union, well, on paper, it's great in the sense that our exports to the European market have been increasing since the implementation of the FTA. But the purpose of that FTA was regional integration among the Pan-European countries that are all involved in the overall regional FTA. But there's always a catch. We all know that. And in the case of Morocco, although our exports were actually going up, what happened is our market share is going down on the European market in favor of countries that have better market access conditions, namely simple transformation. And what happened when we signed the FTA and that regional integration is that it led to the destruction of the Moroccan upstream of the value chain, because it was very easy to import yarn and fabrics from other countries in the region, including, for example, Turkey, to apply simple transformation in Morocco and get duty-free access to the European Union market. So one of the unfortunate consequences of the ease of simple transformation is that it leads to the destruction of the industry in the country. As Imran said earlier, with regards to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, for me, the only beneficiaries of a single stage transformation rules of origin will be the cotton traders, who will be making a lot of money at the expense of the cotton growing countries, and the non-continental parties that will be selling their yarn, their fabrics, and even their garments on our continent. Because, and we've witnessed it in Morocco, they will use every possible trick to get around the rules of origin, to get around the custom regulation, and to simply exploit the continent's potential as a market to sell their product. So what will happen is that if we're not careful, if we don't apply a double stage transformation rules of origin to encourage the industrialization of the continent, what will happen is that trade will definitely lead to the destruction of jobs in our continent, because trade, easy access to imported products from outside the continent at most of the time prices that are below the actual cost of production of these prices. So we will have dumping, you will have subsidized products from outside countries, outside parties coming into the continent and destroying the textile industry in our continents. And we know how labor intensive is the textile industry. So every textile factory that will close in our countries will lead to massive job destruction. So again, our position and our recommendation is to be very careful about the rules of origin that will be put in place. If the focus is on the industrialization of the continent and the textile value chain, then the only possible option and the only reasonable option is a double-stage transformation.
Thank you very much. There's obviously a very clear message coming from the Moroccan experience, and what you're telling us is that if we take the FTA with EU was a simpler and single transformation arrangement, had the impact of increasing exports, but the impact overall has been to reduce the capability in the country because it didn't encourage value addition and it didn't force companies to look inward. This is a message we're getting. So it could have this, as you put it, unfortunate consequences. It's very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have again online a participant from Egypt. I hope he's listening. He is from New Trend Egypt. That's I think a company started. But what I would like to ask Mr. Al-Samawi is the lessons from his involvement with this GTEX project. The GTEX program is a global program for textile and garments development. I think it was implemented by ITC jointly with the Ministry of Industry, and you were involved in that project and in your own company, especially in the context of efficient use of resources. Sustainability is going to be, I think, the future. And if African textile and apparel sector is going to be competitive, sustainability has to factor prominently. And so if you could share with us your experience in terms of the potential for recycling and building sustainable and competitive fiber to garment regional value chains from Egypt perspective, at least from your own experience. And also, if you link that with the fact that there is, I think, increasing interest by buyers, retailers, sourcing from Egyptian companies. Now, what's the view of Egyptian firms in terms of rules of origin? Because these are the two issues we're focusing now, rules of origin and regional value chains.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I'm sorry, I apologize that I didn't make it to be in person there because of the visa issue. But anyhow, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for everyone. About your first question for GTEX, Minadex, yes, I worked with them for two years with more than 20 factories in Egypt. And going back to the recycled garment, you can see that the demand now for the recycled garment is booming up all over the world. And also many retailers have contributed a significant percentage of their sales for only recycled garments. And when I talk about recycling, it's not only about synthetics, it can be also natural fiber. Now it's a new trend for having a recycled cotton. Let me have my answer in a few points in order not to be too lengthy. First of all, in order to base the African textile and apparel domestic and regional value chain to the next generation of fiber, we need to increase the investment in research and development. R&D is very important. And R&D development is not only about the corporate or the private sector. No, it's an engagement between the government, the educational institutes, and the private sector itself. One good example, and we have here in Egypt, we build up a reactive business labs. Business labs is the idea of a business lab is a network of all the stakeholders. They are gathering them together, innovating and getting some new ideas to implement. It's important to have such business labs across the continent. I'm not talking about Egypt or any other. I'm talking about the continent as a whole, and then cooperation between each business lab. Definitely, this will make technology transfer and other things. Second, we need to develop the domestic production capabilities. And this should be done by strategic capacity planning all over the continent. And in this case, we are seeking a high-tech machinery, improving our supply chain infrastructure and our skilled workforce. Third point, we should think. We as the upstream and the downstream, we should think sustainably and act as well, together to reduce the waste and the pollution and the energy consumption. Really, very small measures can be done in every and each factory to reduce its electricity consumption or water. By the way, electricity and water and natural resources that we are using are just non-product output. I will not have this output in my garment at the end of the day. No, it just facilitate my operation. So it is important to go friendly, environmentally friendly, and to save and reduce our waste. Fourth, one of the good approaches that we increase the international partnerships. Engagement, cooperation with international partners is very essential for this because, as we said, they are a bit far away in the recycling process, and we need to have transfer of technology and transfer of expertise and experience. Lastly, we should focus on the innovation and the entrepreneurship. Those are the drivers that could lead us to cope, and maybe later we can master for the next generation of the fiber production. I think this was my answer for the first question. Are you copying with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You have highlighted a number of areas for us to think about and as a takeaway from this from your intervention. But let me highlight two very important. You talked about increasing R&D capability, which is absolutely critical. Innovation is the future. And in fact, one of the working groups that Faisal was talking about will be addressing this issue. So I hope you will join. These working groups will be private sector led, since the purpose is to solicit sort of vision from the private sector. So I hope you'll join and contribute to that discussion. And also, I think very important about domestic productive capacity or production capability, improving something that governments have to follow up as part of the building this sector. Thank you very much. Now, let me turn to here now, Sylvester Ghazi, to you from Tanzania, and you have a very interesting experience both in terms of the association, textile and apparel producers, plus also the company A to Z experience in the textile sector. So my question to you will focus around foreign investment. I have two parts to your question. The first part is on foreign investment. The Tanzania experience, there is mixed experience, positive, negative, positive in terms of investment in the sector, and also FDI in some area was just simply didn't contribute to expansion of the sector. So if you could reflect on that in terms of implications for regional value chains. The second part of my question is about A to Z. You supply to firms in Kenya, firms in this region as well, including foreign firms that are selling abroad through PVH and others, which means the role of A to Z in regional value chains is going to be critical. So if you could share with us future plans in the context of the AfCFTA in terms of contribution to regional value chains, and also your view on rules of origin and the type of rules of origin that you think will be beneficial for deepening the capability of this sector in Africa.
Thank you, Tess. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just going straight to the questions, and let me start with the FDI, just as you started. In Tanzania, the textile industry has existed for a good number of years. Actually, it's over 50 years, and A to Z has been one of the factories which have existed since late 1960s, but it has been modernizing and taking different shapes. But up to 1990s, actually Tanzania had about 35 textile factories running, 35, and most of them were governed by the government. Just a few were private, including A to Z. But slowly, due to some reasons, those factories died one after another. And unfortunately, as we are talking today, we have about 9 factories of textile, not even vertically integrated, but which I would say they're running about 5 of them. So it's a sad history compared to what I know for as regards to Ethiopia, whereby 30 years back, Ethiopia had less than 20 factories of textile, but today they have about 200. So it's a different story. You can see that those factories, what I'm saying about 35 factories, there was no foreign direct investment. These were local, and most of them were government. But as of today, when you talk of FDI, I have some few experiences also in Tanzania, whereby we haven't seen really an effective FDI in the sector. I have 2 examples. One was investment in the spinning subsector for value addition. Tanzania grows very good cotton, like other countries in Africa. And this factory came, and it was a standalone EPZ structure. It operated, manufacturing. It was using local cotton to manufacture yarns, but unfortunately, they were exporting 100% of this yarn to their home country. And even the type of the yarns which they were manufacturing, this was open end, which was not suitable even for the some of the factories in the country. So it went on, but as we are talking today, it's not even functioning. I don't know why. Another company is CMT. It invested. It is operating under EPZ. They are doing sort of single transformation. They are importing fabrics, cut, trim, and export. They're not selling that into Tanzania. So what we see from there, it's only maybe a little bit the labor which they have employed, and that's all. There's not much actually the country is gaining from that. So we haven't seen much of the FDIs to impact the growth of the industry as such. But we have existing factories which are employing a good number. For example, the A to Z is as a group is employing about over 8,000 people and in one compound. But there are other factories, like 3 or 4 together. they are employing about another 8 or so together. So we could see that if we have good policies and good incentives, the existing factories, which have been on the ground for over 30, 50 years, these ones are the ones who are going to stay. They are not going to dismantle their machines and pack them. They are there. These are the ones who need to be supported. Good policies, good incentives, and then they can go into the value chain. There are those which do not have, they are not vertically integrated. They outsource some of the materials, for example, A to Z. A to Z starts from is actually specialized in knits fabric. So they are only outsourcing yarns, either locally, where they can get it to their satisfaction. Otherwise, we do import from outside, just to meet the end user requirement. Because as you've said, A to Z deals with first-class buyers like the PVH, C&K, Children's Place, and the rest, Ackermans here in South Africa. So the end user determines the quality of the product which you're supposed to supply. So you have to get the right material. You have to have the right lead times to make sure that your buyer gets the product in time. So as for me, I think that we need to empower the local industries. I had an opportunity, a very good opportunity yesterday to visit Woolworths, and brother here, Lawrence, took us around to some of their suppliers. Woolworths is doing a great, wonderful job here. They are mentoring these small manufacturers. Yeah, imagine a company with less than 200, about 200 something people, but they are selling their products 100% to Woolworths. And Woolworths is nurturing them, is encouraging them, is supporting them. This is the type of actually support we really need. Yeah, it is within Africa. And we have the likes of Woolworths in different countries. We might have them in Tanzania, in Kenya, we could have them in Nigeria and elsewhere to encourage the existing factories, support them where they need, if it's financial support or it's technical support, skills, and then they have a guaranteed market. Okay. So that's that's what I have to share in terms of the FDI and versus the existing or the local manufacturing. If you wanted to know about the A to Z model in terms of working with these first-class buyers and how maybe it would encourage manufacturing within the region. The good thing is that these buyers, as I've mentioned, they have actually given us an exposure. They have moved us from thinking as local and now thinking international, and there are opportunities, plenty of them. The limit, actually, sky is the limit in terms of textiles, if you want to say like that. Only you need to make sure that we are maintaining the quality, the delivery, the prices, and all that. But because these buyers, they have a guaranteed market, like Woolworths having guaranteed market today to the manufacturers here in South Africa. So, and actually they don't, they are not limited to a handful of suppliers. They want a diversified, number of the likes of the A to Z. Even if they're 10, 20, they are ready to buy, because for them, if they buy at together from a single area, not necessarily a single company, but you have different manufacturers around, they minimize their cost.
Okay. Let me stop you there, because we come back again
Okay.
if there is time. Thank you very much. I think your point about empowering local industries, good policies and good incentives are critical. And also, it's interesting you mentioned how so many of these textile plants, companies in Tanzania, how they are no longer there. There's the same story going in many African countries. These are usually, they were set up under import substitution industrialization, that's why publicly owned. So really moving forward, the vision has to change. This is, I think, the message. If I could turn to you, Isaac, now you have Shona, APZ director, okay? You operate in a special zone established specifically to attract investment into export-oriented activities. And I guess the target was the preferential market access like AGOA. So the question is, how important is regional trade and regional value chains for a company like yours, for example, aimed at mainly exporting to preferential market access elsewhere? This is one question. Linked to that, I really would like your views now with EPZs, and since you operate there, is there a danger that EPZs that provide very attractive incentive to bring in foreign investments, is there a danger that they could be used for transshipment, which bypasses the whole idea of adding value locally? And if so, what kind of rules of origin do you think will prevent such transshipment?
Thank you so much for having me here. And thank you for your questions. Well, what I can say is that when my wife and I started our factory 5 years ago, the biggest challenge we faced at that time was really access to the raw materials that we required. You know, anything that we needed to buy, we were really having to import everything. We didn't know where to source for it, we didn't know any of that, and basically how to get a solution on that. That time we only had about 47 employees. Now, 650 workers later, we still have the same challenge. Yet we have the opportunity is there to actually get what I would call support manufacturing, SMEs who can start producing enough to support the larger manufacturers. And I think once we start once we start getting to that particular level, we can get to a point where the support. Sorry about that. Is this okay now? Yeah, once we get to that level, we can start seeing how regional integration really starts getting to work, to play, because we'll be building industries locally. We'll be able to support vertical integration, and we'll also be able to see how we can depend on each other, on ourselves. The African community right now is demanding better quality than they used to before. The skills that we are training people in our factories is good enough to make what, as my colleagues here were talking about, the export market, right? So that means that we can use the same kind of quality and technology to produce for our own markets here. And that means that they can stop looking for products that they want from out of Africa and start building on looking internationally, regionally. And so that's how we can be able to build that. So building up better quality garments, and then also, the other thing is also how we can support each other. We have gone ahead and also set up a factory in Rwanda. Partnered with some locals from Rwanda, and so we are now helping them build up the standards and manufacture there. We're in the process of discussing with the government of Cote d'Ivoire on another industry that, as Shona, we want to set up in Cote d'Ivoire, and at the same time try to see how we can mentor different regions. The African continent will have, people are going to be very different. In Cote d'Ivoire, you'll probably find a lot of interesting meals to make fabric that would probably be brought to the Eastern African region for manufacturing. So you'd find that kind of setup here. And maybe towards down south, you'll have a lot of stuff, maybe the toys and jewelry being done there. In terms of the FDI, well, I think what can happen is that governments, if governments, can I remove one of the mics? Hello? I need to use this one. Can you hear me now? It's off? Battery. Oh, there we go. Yes. So in terms of the foreign direct investments, what I think is that governments can be able to come together to make sure that some of the things that they are doing in terms of encouraging ease of doing business is standardized for the whole region, for the continent. Things like policies to be created that would make sure that things like wages and labor laws are not adjusted because of political interest, but mostly because of the business interest. Those are things that I think would be able to help it move from a wave and into a growth trajectory. And then obviously, when we are looking at transshipment, I think for me, what I would say is that transshipment, I would consider it something like a temptation to...
A temptation.
A temptation, yes. A temptation to import because of probably the laws and taxations that are making it difficult for doing business in Africa. So if we look at how we can make sure that we are able to make business done properly and easier in Africa, then the temptation of having to go for an easier solution of importing and doing it through transshipment would actually disappear. I think that should be the way.
Okay.
Yes.
Point taken. Congratulations, first of all, for starting your business, which is not always easy, but I understand it's very successful exporting business, so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
On the transshipment, well, I see a point. Doing things properly will minimize, but I think having a more, not restrictive necessarily, but rules of origin that encourages value addition could also help. That was
exactly. Yes, that's the point. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Okay, thank you very much. Now come to Lawrence, and now, what I would like to ask you, Lawrence, is that, I mean, as representing a retailer, which is very important in the chain, and there are two global trends now impacting and sourcing of at least apparel products. One of them, as we mentioned before, is the nearshoring concept. This disappointment with global value chain, especially post-COVID. And also there is growing importance of sustainability, circularity. Now, these global trends, how much do you think had the impact on Woolworths, especially in terms of operations in this region? Now, linked to that, I would also like to ask you the role that you think Woolworths could play in the regional value chains. I know that you're sourcing a lot locally in terms of, since the whole objective is to encourage and promote regional value chains, and retailers are very important in dictating what kind of products are produced, where, how much, by whom. So if you could share with us the vision, the thinking from Woolworths' point of view.
Thank you, Tess. I think maybe just to start off with, if those of you have had the opportunity to read the Business of Fashion report that was published in February by McKinsey, they've called out globally 3 major trends. The first is nearshoring, or bringing manufacturing as close to retail source as possible.
The other is strategic partnerships with suppliers, because trade has become so volatile and that the predictability of trade has become so uncertain. You cannot operate transactionally with suppliers, so they say that a strategic partnership has become paramount in the relationship between retail and supplier. The third biggest trend is, as you call it, is sustainability. Now, let's look at nearshoring and onshoring. So it's not just a South African trend, it's a global trend. The reason why it's a global trend is for the following reasons. Firstly, protectionism. Everyone is looking after closing their own borders and managing their own spaces. And it would have started with Trump and let's make America great again. It would have been Brexit. Even as we sit here, AfCFTA, everyone's looking at protecting their own environment. And that is leading to the phenomenon of onshoring or local manufacturing. In addition to that, there is supply chain disruptions across the world. The predictability of supply chain, especially with what is an imminent Ukraine-Russia issue, could be very, very uncertain. And that supply chain costs and supply chain uncertainty is driving nearshoring. In addition to that, we've got volatile currencies. And the more onshore you are, the more predictable and certain your currency is. And then there's the element of sustainability. And post-COVID, when the world stopped and watched, and the entire nations watched the world heal, sustainability became top of mind. And, we are amongst the dirtiest industries in the world. It takes 2,000 liters, 2,600 liters of water to make a t-shirt. 3 kilograms of carbon dioxide is emitted in the atmosphere in the making of a t-shirt. 150 grams of pesticide, insecticides go into conventional manufacturing. So all of those factors, and we contribute to almost 20% of industrial waste across the world, all of those factors is driving countries to think differently and to manage their carbon footprints and to move product less. And that is driving this onshoring. From a Woolworths perspective, we have always thought local. Almost just over 50% of what we buy comes out of Africa. 30% specifically out of South Africa. And we have an aggressive plan to grow that 30% local. We're signatories of the master plan. We're committed to it. And we have plans in place around import replacement. So what is it that we can't make currently in the country? How do we create the capability of making it? And then how do we start the transfer? Yesterday I had the opportunity of taking a few of our colleagues into a factory. A product that we were historically sourcing out of Korea for many years. It's Japanese technology called heat generation, and it controls your body temperature. So if ever of you are enjoying the winter this season, you can go into Woolies, buy a heat gen garment, and what it's able to is regulate your temperature. So we were taking Japanese technology into Korea and then bringing it into South Africa as a finished product. We firstly created the capability of a local manufacturer to make the product. We then created the capability of a local knitter to buy the yarn and make the product. So that is an example of taking something that's offshore and bringing it onshore, but to do that, I've got to create the capability. A lot of that capability creation works in collaboration. Now, I said over 50% of what we buy comes from Africa. 30% comes from South Africa, but 20% comes from the rest of Africa. So Mauritius, Madagascar, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, all are key partners to us. Now, Mauritius is a key partner in that within Mauritius are great centers of excellence. And what we do is almost 3 of our big suppliers have some partnership or collaboration with Mauritius. So they're either bringing fabric in, or they're taking intelligence out of the factories there that's being transferred here. And that transfer of intelligence is what's enabling both countries to benefit. So why is 20% of what we buy out of those specific SADC countries? Is because we have a free trade agreement. Now, that free trade agreement enables it. Last week, I had the opportunity to be in Nairobi, where I saw outstanding centers of excellence in manufacturing or exporting into the US. If I had to bring those products into South Africa, I'm subjected to the 45% duty. Whereas product now is coming out of China that is highly productive. Although I'm paying the 45%, I can bring it into South Africa. However, if I had the ability to bring it out of Kenya trade-free, then what is currently in China could very easily shift to Kenya. So those are the opportunities that I believe the African Free Trade Agreement can offer us. And we can sit and debate, whether we go one stage or whether we go two stage. We've had a SADC agreement for many, many years. If I look at most of the African countries buying Mauritius, we still don't have a textile industry. Whichever way we go, we as a retailer will be in a better position. We'll be able to procure out of Africa. Whether it will eventually create, whether you insist on a two-stage as an entry into the free trade agreement, and whether that will give you the benefit we want, it's questionable. However, what I do know is the moment you create one industry, you create the manufacturing industry of garments, it will force the emergence of other bits of industry. So that is our perspective on that matter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lois. I think obviously we can consider Woolworths as a role model. And from what you described, especially this emphasis you gave to creating strategic partnership, which is very important for regional value chains. And buyers, retailers are very important because you dictate in many ways how the chain operates, who produce what, when, by what quantity, what quality. So I think the fact that you're also working on building capability, local capability, to increase local sourcing, I think is very encouraging. This is what we need for the new vision in the context of regional value chains. So thank you very much for sharing that. Lastly, I think we have, is she connected? Yeah. Someone very important. The labor side is really critical. It's difficult to discuss these issues without considering on the issue of labor. So we have someone from Industrial Union, and my question to her is the following. Usually it's argued that the major constraint in the development of this sector to make it competitive and sustainable is shortage of skilled labor. We hear this. And it's despite the fact that many African countries are promoting themselves as destinations of abundant and low-wage economies, but the sector, to develop it in an integrated manner, requires a lot of skills. You know? So what I would like to ask our colleague is whether she shares this perception, whether she thinks that this reflects reality, what I just said about shortage of skills. And linked to that, since if we're going to develop the sector, make it competitive, sustainable, and especially promote regional value chains, then skill development is going to be important. So from your point of view, what do you think the public policies and also private sector contribution in building Africa's skills and capabilities that this sector needs? And also, you can add labor's view on the rules of origin, since we're discussing that issue.
Hello, thank you very much, Speaker. First of all, my name is Paul Francis Destament, and I'm the Regional Secretary of Industrial Global Union. We are a global union with a regional office based in Johannesburg that services the Sub-Saharan Africa part of the continent. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak on this very important issue of the AfCFTA. We actually also, I heard the comrades from Nigeria mentioning that usually when government, are very quick to come up with some of these initiatives without involving, important partners. And then we're still hoping that we'll be really involved, in the development of some of the policies that have to accompany the AfCFTA, because as Labour, we really were not part of the regional discussion. So I'm very happy that, we have been given this platform, to express ourselves in some of the issues pertaining to the free trade, like the continental Africa free trade. So for trade unions and as a regional representation of the Global Trade Union Federation, the objective of a project like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is not merely trade, Rather, the key objective is trade for the purpose of shared, mutual, deeper, and then I'll say wider economic growth and industrialization, and massive increase in the number of people in decent jobs that are built based on respect for fundamental rights at work. So the issue around the training of skilled workforce and the related costs necessitates a social dialogue, pretty much, with which with the main key partners, government, business, and labor. For government, perhaps together with business, we agree that there's a need to actually upgrade or develop, some vocational schools and university curricula, also to introduce the textile engineering so that they build and match the skills required for the sector. However, these skills are not only, that should be developed or upgraded. It should not actually be specifically, for, to create engineers and all that. We also have to develop the capacity and have first-class custom officials. Because as you know, some of the previous speakers have spoken about some of the rules of origin, whereby, we know that with, our porous borders, and then the lack of skill of some of our custom officials, we know how smuggled goods mix into our borders. But it's also important for business to know that a skilled workforce will also demand decent wages. But however, for an industry as a textile and garment sector, which is known to practice the race to the bottom approach, when it comes to wages, it's imperative for business to be cognizant of the fact that decent wage will be the key to successful trade agreement. Because I think at the helm of it, when the idea came about, I think with a continent with about almost 1 billion souls, I'm sure the creation of jobs, but evidently decent jobs, is at the heart of any also trade agreement. While we are talking about businesses, we're talking about, all investment and all. At the end of the day, the people have to produce these garments. For instance, in South Africa, I think it was mentioned earlier, we have the clothing and textile, footwork and leather master plan, which is an example of an industrial policy that can be used for training, which is an outcome of social dialogue processes. One of the key objectives is to improve competitiveness, technology skills, and transformation. Investors also in the textile and industry, and I'll take the example of North Fund, which is, I think, Norwegian investors. We had a meeting with them not too long ago. And then North Fund is, interested in investing in the garment and textile industry in Kenya, and where there will be, for instance, local as well as learning exchanges with other textile producing countries, for instance, including Sri Lanka. And factory owners can send workers for learning exchanges in other countries where they are, where countries that are, garment producers. As an international body, as industrial, we do have something called the framework agreements, which are agreements that are negotiated between ourselves and then the brand. We have various agreements. For instance, we have the Bangladesh Accord, we have the Act, that we signed with various brands, international brands. And then a part of those.
Yeah. If you could.
Excuse me.
If you could just wrap up.
Wrap up?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a part of the disagreement, we can also, include clauses that's required skill training. So just to sum up, what we propose is the following 6-pack necessities, to be considered by the AfCFTA, which is a long-term thinking in which Africa's tomorrow is designed and pursued today. The rules of trade that create full, flourishing, and competitive value chains from fiber to garment, embedding an appropriate and developmental, industrial, and investment policy for the continent, protection of workers' rights, and fair trade through a social clause, human rights due diligence in the textile and garment supply chain, embracing and excellent in sustainability and the best class custom integrity.
Okay.
So perhaps in a nutshell, this is maybe where I'll stop. And I thank you very much for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think point well taken. Creating jobs is very important, but it has to be decent jobs and decent wages, which means the sector has to shed the traditional image of low wage and low value production. Okay, it's very clear. Unfortunately, we don't have time. In fact, we've abused a little bit more time from next session. I really would have liked to have involved with the participants, but we didn't have time. Faisal?
Thank you so much. I know we don't have much time, so we're going to have to wrap up. Let me start by thanking all the organizers. I want to start with Vuyiswa Mkabela, who's been our lead researcher, and I think all of you online and all of you in the panel know her. Thank you so much. Thanks to all the researchers who've helped us, Professor Lindsay Whitfield, ODI, Dirk and Prachi and others, TBI, Chema, Rishon and others who've helped us, and many other institutions, the ITC, that's the International Trade Center, and many of the UN institutions have collaborated with us. So there were two outcomes we wanted for today. One was to consolidate the vision for a regional value chain. And remember, I told you that we do have a vision. Do you believe we have a vision? Yes. Yes. And what a vision. So thank you so much to all the fantastic people we have, both on the panel here, face-to-face and online, who really are the leadership of the continent and really are providing us with an amazing new vision to dynamize the industry, to build a renaissance, a renewal, and to really integrate this industry across the continent, end to end. We had with us today colleagues from the north, from the south, from the east, and the west. So really we had a full representation from across the African continent, from all segments of the value chain, from the cotton, textiles, apparel, and from the retail sector. What a vision. A buyer-driven value chain right across the African continent. The trade unions remind us that it must be based on decent work, and we can only do that if we increase value right across the continent, industrialize, and produce high-quality goods. So thank you so much to all of you who have participated. The final step is to implement, and we did agree that we want to establish 3 working groups, one on competition, one on investment, and one on the rules. And I really urge all of you to send your names, those of you interested, to Vuyiswa Mkabela, to any one of you on the panel. Vuyiswa's email is there. Please encourage private sector colleagues to participate and to join the working groups. So thank you all for participating. You've all been fantastic. And a big hand to the panelists. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And this is my card. I didn't give you. I hadn't given it to you.